Thank you for joining me. I'm glad you're here. My name is Jerrel. I develop games for a living. Today I'm going to perform an analysis and share my thoughts on the new Star Fox character designs. I will be comparing the new Star Fox character designs, particularly the visual aesthetic and proportions. I will be comparing them to the previous game in the series, Star Fox Zero, and I will explain what is different, what makes the new designs feel darker, grittier, more mature, and more interesting in my opinion. I think these designs are more interesting. So people online are discussing these designs, and it's great to have discussions like this. This is one of the best things about art and media in general, is that we can discuss them. There will always be things that we disagree or agree on, and it's interesting to hear the thoughts of other people and to share why we like or why we dislike something. That doesn't mean that we can't get along. It doesn't mean we have to fight with each other. It just is something interesting to talk about. So there is a distinct difference between this design and this design, and primarily the biggest difference that is most important are the proportions. And in speaking of proportions, I'm going to proportion myself down just a bit so I don't take up so much space in the frame. There we are. Now, throughout different versions, we can see that these are different versions of the Fox McCloud character. This is different from this one, but the core identifying traits of the character still exist. It doesn't matter that this is a totally different aesthetic, different style, we still can tell that this is Fox McCloud. Now, why does that work? It works because we understand what core identifying traits are. And the core identifying traits that make it easy for us to tell are the green jumpsuit, the white jacket, red bandana, fox head. He's got his scouter so we can check the power levels of his enemies, and he has gloves. As long as he has those elements, it will be very, very easy to tell what character this is. We identify characters very strongly through color palettes. And even though the color palette is desaturated, we still can tell that this is green, white, red. Our primary color for this character would be seen as green. Our secondary color would be brown, but we have another secondary color, which is white. And then we have our accent color, which is red. Now, if we take a look at our proportions here, what is most different that we see that makes this character design and this aesthetic so different are the proportions of the body to the head ratio and the eye to head ratio. First, let's take a look. So we have our eye. We'll just block them out so it's less distracting. Hold on, that looks scary now. Okay, that's basically the size of our eyes and the size of our head. So if we block out the other, I didn't do a good job on that. To be easier with a drawing tablet. So I've included something that isn't exactly part of the, it's more of the fur. Okay, so let's just say that is the proportion we have for the head and the eyes. And now if we have a look at this character, significant, don't want to exaggerate the point, do we? Now, if we just take a look at the space that the eyes occupy on the head, you can tell I'm just removing those. I'm painting over it so it's less distracting. But you can see that the eyes occupy significantly more space on the head. And in general, when we want something to look cute, when we want something to look like a child, we generally make the eyes bigger because we understand, we subconsciously understand, we know what a baby looks like. We know what a child looks like. And on a child, we have a proportion where the eyes take up more space on the head. The eyes are bigger in proportion to the head. And that's something that we just understand. There's no rule, nobody has said it, but it's something we understand because we've all seen a baby before. Let's go ahead and take a look at the size of the head. So let's just mark this out. So this would be the head, and this will be the body. Okay? Let's see. We'll go like this. We'll go to the heel, not to the toes, to the heel. All right? And for Fox, the new Fox, let's go like this. We'll measure that there and there. There and there. Let's go ahead and grab this and just see how many head lengths are within that body now. Let's see. So even though the characters, these are scaled to have similar height here, you can see that this, well, this fox should be a heel. The heel shouldn't it? Hold on. So we have 1, 2. It doesn't like clipping. It's fighting me here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Heel to heel, it's 4 and some loose change on that. Let's go ahead and grab this fox, the new fox. And this is not precise. There are more precise ways to do it. This is just to help illustrate the point of proportion of the head to the body. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Just slightly less than 5. So we can round to 4 and 5. So it's basically this head is 5 head lengths compared to this character's 4 head lengths. So this character's head is significantly bigger compared to this character in proportion to the whole body. It is this very minor detail that makes this character look like an adult and this character look like a child. And in general, we don't identify this character as a child, but we identify it subconsciously as something cute and something childlike, something, there's a style that we refer to in Japan that originates from Japan called chibi. And chibi is something where generally the characters are quite cute and they have large heads. So let's go ahead and remove all those details there. If we take a look at the supplemental details on the character here. So something that the original characters all had were these giant honkin' belt buckles. I have personally always found these quite distracting, but they are just part of the character designs. And these have been toned down in terms of visual volume. In audio, we have volume that denotes how loud something is, but something can be visually loud as well. This is something that's quite visually loud. It catches your attention, it's noticeable, and we have toned that down with a new design, so it is less visually loud, but it still conveys that shape in some degree. We have the upside down triangle, and we have a sense of that upside down triangle just here. Instead of using the gold color, which gold is a color that really just stands out, it's eye-catching, we have a gray here, and the gray has some color cohesion with the metal of the gun and the knee pad here. If we take a look at the jumpsuit overall, there is some asymmetry here, which I quite like. Though logically I don't understand why there is asymmetry like this. Have a look there. I'm not entirely sure what the internal logic is there. It doesn't seem to really explain itself, but it looks like we have it there as well. But this is interesting on this design here. This patch of cloth here seems to come up over the belt. That is interesting in a way that I don't fully understand. I don't really understand why it's like that. Here we have these really interesting seam lines, the tubing here, which I find really interesting. We have slight color variations, so the yellow in there. It breaks up the visual monotony in an interesting way. But we have the leather on the leg strap here, so we have horizontal lines on the leg strap, and we have a diagonal line. Diagonals and horizontals allow us to help our characters look interesting in parts where they look kind of boring. We don't see his legs that often anyway, so we still maintain that diagonal strap, which is an identifying trait of his character. We have it there, so it's quite common. Something that we don't have is this diddly bob contraction here, and that's a technical term if you've not heard that. So we don't have that diddly bob contraption, yet we still identify this as Fox. We still can tell that that's what the character is. So this would be a supplemental detail and not necessarily a core identifying trait of the character. What I prefer about these gloves here, I prefer that the gloves are open and you can see the back of his hand, and those look like just patches, but I prefer that. I prefer it over this metal patch here, which doesn't make that much sense because this is a color that does not really appear anywhere else on his character, so there is a lack of distribution of that color, so it looks a little noisy, where something like this is more visually cohesive. So I really prefer that. If we take a look at the new gloves, we have this red here, and this is an example of significantly more visual cohesion. This is overall a much, much stronger character design. If we have a look at the red here, it's basically the same color. It's slightly different, but it's similar enough to where it serves visually as the same palette, really. So we have the gloves, we have the bandana, we also have this little, I don't know what this is for. This little badge, we have the red on the patch, and then now we have just a splash of the red. It seems there's less red. You know, we have the red there. If we look at the other design, there's also red there. So it was a good idea. Otherwise, Fox only has the red there and then the red on the patch. Having it on his hands just makes a little more sense, and it adds just a bit more visual cohesion. So that's really nice to see. Also, what I really like, the use of these shoulder straps. It's not just the color, but the material. We have the brown leather here, which is repeated here. This is the same brown leather there. And we have the brown leather on the straps and on the boots. Significantly more visual cohesion. If we have a look at the Fox with the robot legs, there is no real repetition of that metal anywhere except possibly his Beats by Dre. I think these are Beats by Dre, which they're very Frutiger Arrow, aren't they? They look like they came out of the mid-2000s there. So what we have here is just a visually coherent design. It's just so much more visually coherent. Here we have this black strap that adds layering to the belt. So the belts can be, it's easy for a belt to look pretty boring. But this is very, very similar. It doesn't appear to be exactly the same because it doesn't catch light, but it's very, very similar to the leather, the black part of the gloves. And we have that layered atop the belt, so the layering adds visual interest, but there's visual cohesion because that black layering is repeated here on the shoulder strap as well. So I quite like that detail very much. It's visual cohesion, it's interesting, it's using layering, and we have trim on the gloves. In general, when we use trim, it's to help break up similar colors. Because the black is softer, it's not as dark. You see this is a real dark black here, so it's fine that it contrasts with the color of his fur. Here if we, let's just turn that black and white really quick. If you turn that grayscale, you can see that the gloves actually are quite a similar tone to the fur, and so they blend in together, and it would look pretty sloppy. So if we use what we'll do is we'll just paint over the trim. So the trim separates tones so that there can be more contrast and visual interest. If we paint over the trim and get rid of the trim like that, it's much harder to tell where the glove starts and where the fur ends. Is that something inappropriate? I don't know, and I hope I never find out. So the trim there is, to me, it shows an example of very thoughtful character design, is that it helps that pop a lot more. And if we take a look at character design like Tifa Lockhart, in the original Final Fantasy VII, she had the white tank top. It was a very similar color to her skin. in the Final Fantasy remakes. It's much stronger character design because she's wearing a black undershirt that helps her look tougher and more utilitarian, but it also separates those colors and adds more contrast between the colors. So it is quite interesting to see that. So this is a design that overall, it's objectively just stronger. We also have the use of that black trim there as well, just for a bit more cohesion and distribution of that black color there. Great use of horizontal, vertical consideration. This is such a strong character design. I didn't think it was going to be that strong when I took a look at it. For me personally, the only, and I generally don't bring my personal feelings into these character design analysis discussions. Personally, I would like the Scouter to be larger. For me, I feel logically it's too far off to the side and it's quite small. So he would have to look away from wherever he's looking, and it would probably be pretty hard to see whatever is on the screen. Something like this covers his eye in a more organic manner. It has more internal logic and it makes more sense. Same with this one. So I don't necessarily like the very small Scouter, but I feel they scaled that down because the eyes are so much smaller as well. So that is Fox McCloud. And something that I notice that is very strong cohesion is the eyes tend to be the exact same color as the jumpsuit. Have a look at this nice vibrant green here. Matches that jumpsuit very, very closely. Same situation here. His eyes match the jumpsuit. They're less saturated than the previous design. And we have this one where his eyes are less saturated, but they're basically the exact same color as this desaturated green jumpsuit. The colors in this design are more natural. They're more desaturated. They're less vibrant, less poppy, so it makes it feel less like a cartoon. Visual art is communication, and communication works because we all understand each other to some degree. We all have a shared cultural history. We all have a shared history in media. And so we can take visual shortcuts and we can use the shortcut of something that is more vibrant, feels like something that is fun, like a cartoon. Something that is desaturated, we subconsciously understand that's more serious, that's a little more grim. And so that is a visual shortcut that they've used here, and I strongly, strongly prefer these designs. They are significantly just stronger. There isn't a reason why I would say you're not allowed to dislike this. Of course you can dislike this. It's art. You feel a certain way towards art because of the life that you've lived. You can say that this fox is the best one. The one on the left, you can say this is the best fox. And if that's your favorite one, that's absolutely justified. If this is your favorite fox, absolutely justified. You're absolutely allowed to say that. I wouldn't say I have a favorite design, but this is the one that I respect most from a character design, from a visual standpoint, from an artistic standpoint. And very quickly, let's just take a look at the character designs. These are the designs from Star Fox Zero. We have nice round shapes and a simplicity of detailed density. And detailed density, you can generally tell when a character was designed based on the detailed density of that character. Characters generally in the 80s had pretty low detailed density, especially that extended into the early 90s, 80s and early 90s. The characters tend to have very round shapes. It is the mid to late 90s when characters start to become more angular and have a bit more detailed density to them. In 2000s, we have an exploration of shape. I wouldn't say that it is expressionist German aesthetic when it comes to the 2000s, but characters start to experiment more with abstract shapes, and they start to have significantly more detailed density. Specifically in the mid to late 2000s, we have way more detailed density. It's something that's quite visible in the Digimon designs, and I have shared my thoughts on the Digimon designs through episodes on this channel. If we go ahead and just flip over to the comparison of the new designs, we can take a look. So first, let's take a look at Peppy. Something that is very noticeable with Peppy is this huge honkin', whatever this nose cheek area is. I'm not a rabbit doctor, so I couldn't give you the exact term, but that nose cheek area, if we see it, is significantly smaller. And again, it is proportions that make things feel more adult. Peppy is an older character. And for him to look so adorable, sure, that's fine if everyone looks adorable, but we are seeing a story where the visual component is now just as important as the narrative itself, it seems. And we need to visually convey characters more accurately. And we are leaning away from abstract visual storytelling and a little closer to literal storytelling. So we are literally saying this character is older because his proportions, they do make him feel quite older than the other characters. We associate white and gray hair with age. And so if we see that the colors here, he used to generally have a yellowish color to his fur. It's now white and gray, so much less saturated. We associate that subconsciously with an older person, an older character. So he does feel older here because of that. And we will take a look at his design here. We have this sort of insulated puffer jacket here, which I quite like. We have access to tools now. I'm not talking about AI, I'm talking about procedural generation. Procedural is where we should be investing our time and our money because that gives artists complete and total control and huge freedom to control what they are creating. And it allows artists to express and convey their thoughts and to really do more with their work. And while we say you can do more, when we give artists tools where they can do more, we tend to see a stage where we are just pushing the limits, and we tend to see very sloppy and messy work because people see that they can do more, so they try to do more, when more is not better. Quantity is not better. We've seen a lot of character designs recently where the people creating these designs have tools that allow them to do more, so they just do as much as they can. Doing as much as you can, doing more does not equal quality. You've just created quantity, and quantity does not equal quality. So if there's some interesting trait here in that Fox and Peppy have this similar, very, very similar knee pad. Falco has a different knee pad, but they all have just the one. Slippy is the only one that has two knee pads, and I think that's interesting to see something different on his character that maybe conveys to us that he is a little bit different from the other characters, and he is. He is not as good of a pilot. He is the engineer, but he's still a part of the team, and we need a way to show that he's visually different. So let's take a look at the jumpsuits here. The jumpsuit that Peppy has here, they're all quite generic. They all have different shapes. Peppy's, Slippy's the only one that really stands out for having these round boob padding, and the boob padding here adds more roundness to his character. So what I like about the designs here is that we can see the materials on the clothing here. Again, it's just an increase in detail density. It doesn't necessarily make the designs better, but it tells me that they're leaning away from abstract and toward the literal. And that's nice. I think it's nice to see a different take on these characters because the story is quite dark, and to convey a sense of grittiness and imperfection is something that I'm interested in seeing, because I don't want another game that looks like this, just more HD. I don't want that. Something that we see here are these nice ice hockey shoulder pads. It's interesting to see this interesting shape here. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but there appears to be some form of symmetry to Peppy, which generally use symmetry to say that a character is together and organized and neat. But there's still enough asymmetry. Oh, look, no, if we take a look here, if we take a look at Peppy into his knee area, we can see that he does actually have both metal knee pads, one there and one there. So it is actually Fox just has the one. It could convey a sense that he's still on his journey and he's not really fully complete, that he's missing something. And the same could be said for Falco as well here. So I will be discussing that, but Falco has these really cool gambeson type pants. There's a sense of padding and stitching to it. Really interesting. I really like seeing those kind of details on these character designs. It makes him look more prepared for cold weather, but maybe he needs more padding because he's a bird, and birds generally don't do that well in cold weather unless they're like a penguin or something. So we have a look at the shoulder pads of Peppy, and if we take a look at his original design, he didn't have that. He looks more like an office worker. This coat makes him look less like a combatant and more like an office worker. And I never really quite liked that about this particular design, as he just looks more like he belongs in the office telling people what to do. This design makes him look more utilitarian and combative, so I quite like those changes. You put shoulder straps on anybody, it's going to make them look more rugged. Let's take a look at Slippy here. Slippy is the one that is most similar to his previous design in terms of proportions, and that is because he, I believe, is the youngest character, and he is the fun, kind of goofy character, a little bit of a comedic relief, but he's not the butt of the joke. I like that they've removed a lot of the shiny blue glowing metal because it helps the designs feel a bit more organic. It's something that we can relate to more. When we see something like this is not something that we have in the real world. It's not something that we relate to. And when we see things that we don't understand, we don't comprehend, we don't really relate to that, we can't look at that and say, I know what that is. We tend to associate it with fantasy and we disconnect from it. And so we form a relationship with the media based on how we're able to subconsciously relate to things. And this forces us to disconnect and view this as a fantasy world. They've removed those elements in a way to where we can relate to this, because now there are so few elements where we would look at that and say, I don't know what that is. There is nothing on these characters that makes us say that. Anything that you look at this, you can say, I know what that is. This thing, I don't know if that's a little flashlight or a vape. I hope it's not a vape. I don't really want that to be a vape. It'd be so lame. We can see a little bit of the tearing of the material on the hat here, which I quite like. That's kind of neat. I didn't notice that before. But we have layering on Peppy, I keep saying Peppy, on Slippy that we didn't really see before. And I quite like that because it helps his face have more presence, and that his bandana is actually on the inside of his jumpsuit. And his jumpsuit actually looks quite different from the other characters. The jumpsuits themselves have more unique geometric identity. Peppy and Fox have the most standard looking, like these are jumpsuits. Having the exposed zipper just makes it feel like it's something older. Having this his gut, you know, kind of makes it feel like he's put on weight over the years and he's using his old jumpsuit that's a little ill-fitting because he's put on weight. With Slippy, his jumpsuit looks more like a mechanic's jumpsuit, something that's interesting. Fox's, let's see, it seems it opens on that side. Slippy's opens on the other side. We have these nice vertical lines on there that kind of, these convey a sense of pocket pouches here. This is saggy and loose and baggy, and it makes the character feel looser, feel less disciplined. I really like that design choice to make this look more like a mechanic's jumpsuit as opposed to a flight suit. And if we take a look at Falco, I quite really like this. So there, really, it's that brown component on the inside that I think is really, it's just cool. And it's rolled up. If you see here, it's rolled up a bit, so it looks like this flight suit can actually, if you unroll it, it'll probably, you know, drop down to the bottom there. He has two belts that extend from his buckle. If we take a look at the original design, it looks like he just has the one. Very interesting. So he's the only character that has two. So there are more unique identifying traits to these characters. I really like that. I really like what I'm seeing here. In the trailer, we can see that his sleeves are torn, but it's a bit tougher to see. He has metal shoulder armor on just the one. The other arm does not have shoulder armor, so there's asymmetry there. He has asymmetry here, and I think it's a much better idea to have the two belts. The reason why it's better to have the two belts is if you have too much asymmetry on your character, it looks sloppy. It feels weird to have too much asymmetry. And so the reason they've made this choice here is to balance out the asymmetry. This is a very strong choice that they've made because this helps the character. It balances out that just a little bit. Otherwise, we have the gun, we have the belt, we have the knee pad, and we have the metal shoulder pad. Now, if you have a look, that character is now weighted very heavily to one side, and it's not good to have a design like that because it makes the character look unstable and sloppy. And balancing out with that, good call, very good call on that. So I can appreciate that. I really like these black sleeves here. So his jumpsuit is so different from everyone else's, and these sleeves, they seem to have these sort of material insulation, and there's a real bagginess to it, which to me kind of says, you know, it conveys a sense that he needs his arms to have looser sleeves in order to be comfortable because he's a bird. He's got wings under there. And if we take a look at the characters, other characters, they all have standard sleeves where it looks to me where Falco has customized his gear a little bit. He has torn those off. What I really like is this imperfection on his beak here that makes him look like he has sustained battle damage and that he is wearing a scar. This imperfection here, it looks like a scar a little bit from having gotten fights in the past. So it makes him look more rugged, more battle worn. They have shrunk his eyes down so that he looks, you know, more adult. But just my personal preference, I would have liked if the eyes were a little bigger because birds have huge eyes, right? In comparison to their heads, birds typically have very large eyes, and that's something that I would personally prefer to see differently. But just because I prefer something to be different doesn't mean that I know better. It doesn't mean that I would do a better job. It doesn't mean that they've done a bad job. It's just that we all have personal preferences. I would have liked the eyes to be just a little bit bigger because birds have typically quite large eyes in proportion to their head. So this is really fantastic. We even see different types of feathers. It's not just the same one kind of feather over and over again. Here it's just a very generic type of conveyance of a shape. But here we have, you know, different shapes for the feathers, different roundness, and then you have different sizes up here. And it feels almost like a hairstyle. If they were to do one where he kind of had like a pompadour, you know, I feel like he draws a little bit of energy from like a 50s greaser. So and that could even be why he has black sleeves to convey, to evoke the memory of like a 50s greaser wearing a leather jacket. Anyway, that is my analysis on that. I need to get back to work. I'm currently porting my latest game to the 3DS. I'll be doing a free homebrew version if I can get it to work and not crash on the 3DS. And my latest game is The Hero of Destiny Was Killed by the Final Boss. And if you'd like to see that, it's available on Steam and Nintendo Switch. I'll set the link in the description. But with that game, The Hero of Destiny is killed by the final boss, and you have to use just a bunch of NPCs who have no magic, no legendary weapons, and you've got to basically solve puzzles. The battles in the game are like puzzles because you're hugely underpowered. The enemies are so powerful, and you're basically building a deck and using more than 50 different characters to try to get through the final dungeon and defeat the final boss. So yeah, if you'd like to check that out, link will be in the description. And if you would like me to do an analysis of Cat, because we've seen Cat, I can do an analysis on that and share. If we, I don't know, let's set a target. If this video gets, I don't know, if this video hits 10,000 views, then we will do an analysis video on Cat. So I generally don't ask people to like and share, but like and share. And people have been telling me that YouTube is not recommending my videos even though they're subscribed. So hit the bell icon. I never say that. But yeah, subscribe, share this video. If we hit 10,000 views, I will do an analysis video for Cat. Take care of yourselves. Be well. I'll see you around. And check your teeth if you